I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
The Natural Resources Research Institute has refined its strategic initiatives as it looks to the future. We'll talk with the Institute's executive director.
The city of Superior is using GPS technology to help improve its winter plowing operations. We'll have a report.
And we'll have an update on CHUM's social service programs with its current and past leaders.
These stories and voices of the region coming up on Almanac North. Well, hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. And Julie, this is our final show of 2021, and what a year this has been.
It has been an incredible year. Lots of things to think back at and lots to look forward to.
I think you're right. A lot of this, of course, took place with COVID going on.
It did indeed.
All right, well, let's begin with the headlines.
All right. Thank you, Dennis, and welcome everyone. The long-delayed restoration of the historic Duluth Armory appears to be back on track. The Armory Arts and Music Center will hold a news conference Monday to announce a partnership with Sherman Associates to rehab the building. Organizers say the renovated armory will serve as an economic, cultural, and entertainment hub for the region.
The Wisconsin DNR is asking for the public to comment on a plan to relocate a portion of Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline. Enbridge has applied for permits to build about 41 miles of 30-inch diameter pipe in Ashland, Bayfield, and Iron counties. The reroute will move the pipe outside of the tribal lands of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa.
A longtime forest management professional has been named the new leader of Minnesota Forest Industries. Rick Horton was announced as the new executive director of the association that represents forest products companies. Horton replaces Mike Birkeland, who is moving on to a new position with the Beltrami Electric Cooperative. With
less than a week left in the red kettle season, Duluth Salvation Army is behind in its effort to raise $220,000. As of Thursday, the Army was about $90,000 short of its goal. Look for the red kettles as you shop this weekend, so the Salvation Army can meet its food and toy-giving goals for those who signed up for help back in November.
The Natural Resources Research Institute in Duluth was formed in the 1980s by the Minnesota legislature. Its vision was to provide research to better understand and manage our natural resources. As 2021 comes to a close, the NRRI has refined its areas of strategic focus. Here to tell us more about those key initiatives is Rolf Weberg, Executive Director of the Natural Resources Research Institute. Rolf, welcome back. It's been a few years since you've been here. For those who may not be familiar with NRRI, what goes on up in the big fortress?
What goes on at the fortress and at our site at Coleraine, Minnesota as well. We, as you said, are here as an applied research laboratory at the University of Minnesota to look at our natural resources. How can we use them? How can we use them more efficiently? And more importantly, how do we do that with minimizing the impact on the environment?
So what are the key focus areas that you're really kind of zeroing in on right now?
Well, I'll back up just 1 second, because one of the big questions we've got here is how do we all live together on this little blue ball? How do we make good decisions? How do we make good decisions so we have communities, so we have an economy, and so we have an environment to live in? We take that and zoom back in. The things we're really focusing on are what is going to make a difference and an impact to the state of Minnesota, to the nation, and to the globe. These are big questions. They're scary, but we're standing up and we're taking on this challenge.
So what do you do then with all the data you collect?
Well, what we do with our data that we collect is we try to drive for solutions. We integrate across our organization, across the University of Minnesota, and with all of our stakeholders we work with to drive to solutions that will make a difference and move things forward in 3 areas that we're calling our strategic initiatives. Strategic initiatives are things that are big. They're going to be long-time, sustained efforts, something like the Manhattan Project, if you will. We're looking at 3. Number 1, ecosystem resilience. How do we understand the world we live in? How do we understand the changes that are happening, and what do we need to do to adapt, and how do we remediate? Second, iron and minerals of the future. How do we get higher value out of our resources and really drive those industries forward? And third, forest industries of the future. What are we doing now? We know how to make 2x4s and paper. What's next?
So you mentioned iron and minerals. Do you really see the nation's iron and steel industries changing dramatically over the next 15, 20 years? And if so, what can NRRI do to help move things forward in a really positive direction?
That's a great question. There's a global focus on the iron and steel industry right now. If you look at in the United States, steel and cement account for about 18% of the CO2 coming out of this country. There's a big effort globally to take steel and decarbonize steel. That's a huge effort. How do you take the CO2 that we're emitting with an industry we have to have and reduce that impact? And that is a big effort that we're working with Finland, Germany, leading the world, and we're coupling with them.
So is there a long future that the Iron Range can look forward to for its iron industry?
Absolutely. The iron of the future is what we're focusing on. What are those resources that are still here? How will we use them? What are we bypassing today in favor of the taconite industry? How do we install ourselves into participating in the electric arc steel instead of just the blast furnace, which is about a third of that piece of the economy? And then more importantly, what are those products that we aren't making today that are higher value, not just in the steel, but the other places iron can be used in the economy, including energy storage, all the way to diet for that matter. But there are some really, really interesting applications that we have available to us.
Let's talk about future forest industries a little bit. Are there some real promising technologies that you think could really make a difference that your researchers are working on right now?
Yes, we're having some great collaborations across the state. The idea of biorefining, when we look at a piece of wood, if you look at a piece of poplar or a piece of oak, those are different feedstocks, they're different chemically. We are learning how to take those and make different things from them, whether it might be a fuel or it might be a byproduct that we can turn into a material that you might use anywhere from a waterproofing coating or to something that you can actually turn into a plastic.
So what happens to the things that your researchers come up with up there? Do they get out into the market? Are they actually being used?
Yes, and we've put a big effort in the last several years. One of our key launching pad points is the fact that we're driving commercialization, because if you're not going to commercialize it, why are you doing it? So we work through the University of Minnesota, and our scientists are working to actively spin out these ideas. We've spun out a couple of ideas into businesses this last several years that create jobs, use our natural resources in new ways, as well as some of the waste products in new ways.
Rolf, you mentioned the ecosystem. What kind of a impact is climate change having, for example, on the Great Lakes area?
Well, there's a number of stories that came out just in the recent past with our scientists looking at the fact that Lake Superior is warming up quite quickly. So are inland lakes. When you look at this and the impacts that has on anything from harmful algal blooms starting to show up in this part of the world, which is not, we need to understand what kicks those off and how to control those. Invasive species come along with that change.
What's next? Do you see something big on the horizon for you guys?
Oh boy, yeah, there's all, what's
And we
next?
only have about 15 seconds.
Well, I want a crystal ball for Christmas, but we're really looking forward to expanding our influence and reach, not only here in the state, but across the federal government as well.
All right.
Looking forward to that.
All right. Well, Rolf Weberg, thank you so much for coming back, and we'll invite you back on again to talk about the things happening up there.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you
Happy
very much.
holidays to you.
With the unpredictable winter weather in the Twin Ports, the City of Superior has rolled out a new tool for people to stay safe. The city has installed GPS systems in its snowplowing fleet. Almanac North producer Megan McGarvey spoke with Mayor Jim Payne and a snowplow driver about the new system.
Anybody got to stop and use the bathroom?
It's always important to maintain and upgrade Superior's fleet. This is a winter city, and it always has been. And so every generation, every couple years, we should be looking to be more efficient and make sure that winter doesn't negatively impact people's day-to-day lives. And as technology and equipment improves, we need to invest in that.
Our sander fleet is just the first of the trucks that are going to be getting this GPS systems. Eventually, the rest of our snowplows will have them as well. The best influence this has when it comes to having the GPSs is that everyone is informed. We can help increase our flow when it comes to getting areas done. Once an area is completed, we can see maybe there's ways to better go about an area.
When we first started talking about it, I think we all had a little bit of a blind spot thinking that technology was more complicated than it is. In reality, we realized we already have these devices on our police vehicles. We track them all the time. So then we upgraded from there, and it really ended up being Verizon that provided the devices and the software. The existing software shows you where the plows are and what direction they're going, but we also know where they've been. Very soon we're going to show that as well. So when you're about to leave the house, you'll be able to look at whether or not your street's been plowed, or whether or not a street 2 blocks away has been plowed, or how many of the mains and collector routes have been plowed and sanded. And so our goal is more or less total transparency. The only thing that's holding it up is making sure that we can collect and display that information in an efficient and timely way that the public can easily read and understand. And so as we improve our software and our ability to share it, it's all gonna go out.
Being a driver for the Thanksgiving storm, that one was probably the longest storm of my life, and hopefully for the rest of my life. Subsequent back-to-back 16 hours for 2 weeks just to get the city cleared. And then after that, another, I believe it was 2 months of 12-hour shifts to get the city ready for the next storm.
The 2019 storm led to some of the most significant conversations we've had about the operations of our snow clearing and removal within the city of Superior. That storm raged like almost no other storm I've seen in my life throughout the night. And because it was so much snow and so wet and heavy, it created a unique experience for regular citizens. First, we could not keep up with it. The plows ran from the very first flurries and stayed out all night at great risk to their own safety. But to the public, they thought that they weren't even out. Then at one point, we had to pull those sander trucks. They literally weren't heavy enough to plow the snow anymore, and so we had to replace them with heavy tractors. The messaging, though, was very easily confused with we pulled the plows off the road, which was not true. We were plowing the streets, but it sounded like we weren't. And it looked like we weren't because we didn't get to most streets. It took so long, and the snow just filled up everything we plowed.
I think the GPSs will, for a certain value, help people understand what's going on in a storm situation, like the November storm of 2019. There's only so much it can do, though. Really, it'll only give you an idea of where the plows are, hopefully in the future where they have been, so that you know what areas are relatively clear. But in a storm like that, there's only so much you can do to keep up.
It's also worth noting that climate change is having an effect. We are getting more precipitation, heavier snow more often, and Superior was, in terms of being a winter city, was mostly a cold city. We didn't get as much snow as other parts of northern Wisconsin or Minnesota. Now we do, and so that means we have to adapt. Fighting climate change is the work of nations and the whole world. Protecting ourselves against its effects, that's the work of cities.
And with the new technology, you can track Superior snowplows during winter storms. Just go to the city website and search for Truck Tracker. And thanks to Megan McGarvey for that report tonight. And Megan, welcome to the Almanac North team. CHUM is a nonprofit social services agency in Duluth, started back in 1973 and is sponsored and governed by an interfaith coalition of 40 faith communities. The organization offers emergency food, shelter, advocacy, support, and outreach throughout the city. Recently, CHUM's longtime leader retired, and a new leader is now at that organization's helm. Joining us is Lee Stewart, the former leader at the CHUM, and John Cole is the new executive director of that organization. Welcome. Thank you both for being here. Lee, when you look back at all the time you had at CHUM during this leadership, what areas do you think have most settled in your mind? What did CHUM do that you feel that you helped to really truly contribute?
A couple of things come to mind. One is the creation of the Steve O'Neill apartments, for 44
Yes,
families with
certainly.
children. That was certainly another one. One that was less visible, I think, to the public was that we lowered what we call the barriers to getting into shelter, so more people could come in. We allowed pets. We went through a behavioral lens instead of sobriety lens, so it'd be more welcoming to people. And then the third is the warming centers are now institutionalized, not oddly, just like one-offs. And then fourth, our COVID response would be the things that, because we did a really good job at keeping that at bay through most of the
Sure.
pandemic. So those are the four things that come to mind.
Wonderful.
8 years.
Winter, of course, is a particularly hard time for people who are vulnerable and out on the streets. John, are you seeing more people starting to come in and want to use CHUM services as the weather gets a little bit colder around here?
Absolutely. We've been very surprised at the turnout. We are operating most times at capacity now in the warming centers that we have at the Rainbow. And our drop-in center has shown an unusually high amount of persons coming in.
Plus the shelter is, is regular 80
Sure.
beds, so.
So if you're at capacity so often, are there plans to do things to kind of ease some of that demand or to create more space for people?
There actually is a new center being developed right now in the Lincoln Park area, and that will give us expanded capacity to be able to have folks come in from the cold. And so that warming center would become operational in January.
Lee, are there pockets of poverty in Duluth, and if so, where are they?
Well, I think there are, but there's more than just the pockets. I mean, when you look at the straight demographics, some of our neighborhoods that Lisk has pointed out for years are more challenged than others. Lincoln Park, Central Hillside, West Duluth, Morgan Park. But the downtown area is one where that's the lowest income and most challenged. But in every neighborhood in the city, you'll find people who are really struggling.
Lee, you spent a number of years here at CHUM and in other capacities. Is our community making progress when it comes to alleviating the problem of homelessness or hunger in our community?
We're doing a better job from my perspective, on hunger than we are on homelessness. The drivers of homelessness are very complicated, and we haven't yet as a society, not just Duluth, Minnesota, United States, dealt with the absolute lack of affordable housing for people. We have an average of, I don't know, by now almost a year and a half for people between the time they start being signed up to be considered for supportive housing and can actually move into it. That's a statewide issue. So until we really look at that part of the system, it's going to be hard. And to create supportive housing specifically for people who need extra help with mental health and chemical dependency. And I'm not saying that's the reason people are homeless, but homelessness sort of exacerbates that and builds off of that.
John, you have said there is a world of unseen in Duluth, a world full of need. What do you mean by that?
That as folks move around, it is an invisible portion of the population that is experiencing hunger. We are serving over 750 households in the community. And that is because of the economic situation. That these persons are now needing CHUM services to just have food in their cupboards and be able to put food on their table for their children. Over 4,000 pounds of food being distributed every month. And so persons would not necessarily see that, but it is a stark reality for lots of persons in our community.
So there's more poverty than perhaps most of us even realize.
That's correct, yes.
And there's the edge of poverty. I mean, poverty is a technical kind of thing.
Sure,
People
certainly.
who don't have enough money to meet the basic needs of their family. Housing is very expensive. Food is more expensive. Heat is expensive. I was at the grocery store the other day, and a woman was at the bargain piece of it and picked up some hamburger and said, I just can't do it. And she put it in, and she had little kids with her, and I thought, oh.
John, has anything been particularly surprising to you, or have you gained some real insights as you're starting to get to know the population in Duluth and the community here?
I was struck by the high incidence of mental illness and chemical addiction that exists within the homeless population. And the fact that our services, though we do have services, there isn't a residential component so that the folks can work towards overcoming the obstacles. And so we are left with lots of folks in the shelter, and shelter is not a good place to be trying to overcome obstacles or resolve life crises.
How can people who are watching the show tonight help you out in your work?
I think they can be supportive. We are advancing a 5-year plan to address unsheltered homelessness in this community. It's going to cost like $33 million over a 5-year period, creating housing and providing opportunities for persons who are unsheltered to have safe spaces. So it's going to need will from the people and from the government and from all the sectors combined to be able to address that.
And with that, we have to leave. Thank you very much, John Cole, new Executive Director of CHUM, Lee Stewart, the retired leader. Thank you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Well, it's time now for Voices of the Region. Each week we hear from an area journalist about the stories they're covering. Our guest today is Danielle Kaeding, a reporter with Wisconsin Public Radio.
Right now, hospitals and public health officials are still seeing cases and hospitalization rise across the state. It's put an extreme strain on staffing. Some places have even had to close their urgent care centers recently due to the shortage of staff because of the surge in cases. Here in northern Wisconsin and Douglas County, health officials have reported more than 200 new cases of COVID-19 over the past several weeks. Bayfield County said that 1/6 of the deaths due to COVID-19 that they've seen have occurred just in the last month in November. And Ashland County said that they're also seeing critically high levels of cases in their county. And the state's hospital association says there's only one intensive care bed available right now across northwestern Wisconsin. And last week, Governor Tony Evers said that almost 300 healthcare facilities have asked for staffing assistance, and that's prompted the state to request around 100 FEMA workers, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to help out. And in Minnesota, Governor Walz has already called in hundreds of National Guard members to assist, but Governor Evers says he's not looking to do any mass deployments of the Guard here in Wisconsin, saying they're already stretched thin. But some Guard members are going to be trained as nurses to help in state mental health facilities. The Spooner Middle School in northern Wisconsin has been closed for a month now after a strong epoxy-like odor caused an evacuation and prompted 60 students and staff members to seek medical treatment. And the school has been working with 3 separate companies to conduct environmental testing to find out what was the source of what made people sick. And the district said earlier that tests for carbon monoxide levels came back normal after students and faculty complained of headaches and nausea and other symptoms when the building was first evacuated. Now the district has received the results of that testing, but it hasn't shared the findings. School officials claim that their investigation is still ongoing and that they can't release that information until it's complete. So there's a lot of questions still that remain about what exactly happened and how the district is handling this. The school has been operating remotely, and just this week, the district began to offer in-person learning for students 2 days a week for each grade level at the Spooner Civic Center until the holiday break begins. Not all parents are happy about that. And Lauren Marley, who's a parent of one of the students who was hospitalized back in November, she says her daughter had carbon monoxide poisoning and doesn't trust that the school district is telling the whole story. Conservation biologists are hoping to prevent further decline of an at-risk songbird after its range has shrunk more than 80% in Wisconsin during the last 2 decades. The Connecticut warbler is a gray-hooded, yellow-breasted bird. It's pretty hard to spot because it likes to stay hidden in black spruce swamps and jack pine stands across northern Wisconsin. But state regulators and volunteers went looking for the bird, but they couldn't find any sign of them at nearly 60 sites that they surveyed this past summer. And beyond Wisconsin, the bird has declined more than 60% across its range since the late 60s. And it's not the only species that's been in trouble. Research has shown that North America has lost 3 billion birds over the last 50 years. And scientists say that the Connecticut warbler is facing threats from development, from habitat loss and climate change. You know, it's dealing with habitat loss across the state and in its wintering grounds in the Amazon, where deforestation hit a 15-year high this year. And climate change is just putting more pressure on the bird because it's shifting those forests further north that they prefer. And so now the DNR and partners are working to improve and build on its remaining habitat, or the only place that it's been found nesting right now, which is in parts of Douglas and Bayfield counties.
That's our time for now, but you can keep up with our latest updates by following Almanac North on Facebook and Twitter, or visit the WDSE website for program updates and more information about the station. And download the PBS video app for on-demand viewing of Almanac North and your favorite PBS programs. And Julie, Almanac North is going to be off next week and the week after, 2 weeks, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, so I guess this is goodbye until next year.
I guess it is. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's to you and your family.
Same with you, Julie. Thank you very much. With Julie Zenner, I'm Dennis Anderson. Good night, everybody, and be kind, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.